Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Spec Guide. I'm Max. Today I'm joined by Brandon Flash. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing well, Brandon. So, Brandon, for people who don't know you, you work in the charging industry for EVs, correct?
Yes, that is correct. Multi EV owner as well.
Yes, especially with Model 3, which is one of the cars we want to talk about today. A Tesla and then Model 3 and Chevy Bolt. These are two actually affordable electric cars you can get right now. And Brandon, if people have been paying attention to your Twitter or really Twitter at all in the EV world, they've probably
Yeah,
seen that like Model 3s, right? Tesla's cheap sedan, they're
yeah,
actually cheap. Like for years, right, there was this promise of, oh, there's going to be a $35,000 Tesla. And we never
yeah,
saw it. And now we're actually seeing it, and in some cases see it below that price. I think you can get a well spec one for like $30,000 used.
yeah, yeah. You can get a very nice used Model 3 for about 30,000 now. You can get a higher mileage or maybe rougher condition used Model 3 for closer to $25,000, and they have just absolutely tanked. They were going for 40 plus just a few months ago, and now they're actually a good deal.
Yep. So Tesla cut the price on new models, and this has had an effect on the used market. And of course, there's inflation and economic things
Hmm.
going on, meaning that fewer people are probably buying expensive EVs, which is good
Hmm.
news for the prices of Tesla for us that are buying them. So Model 3 has become, I think, yeah, really compelling value. Long time value in the last year, especially, has been the Chevy Bolt. So this has always been an
Hmm.
affordable car, but GM dropped the price by a lot. And so let's say you get this car new today, it's like $26,000 out the door. But then if you're eligible for the tax credit, which we have a video about, by the way, we'll
Hmm.
link in the description. If you're eligible for the tax credit, you get $7,500 off this car. And then if you live in a state like I do in Colorado, you get another $2,000 off. So it becomes significantly less than $20,000 in that situation.
And it's just a crazy value because it's a pretty large battery, solid range, brand new car for sub 20 ish with the federal tax credit and even lower with the state incentive. Just a wild value for a brand new EV.
Absolutely. So let's assume, you're in the position, you have this budget, 30-ish thousand dollars. You could buy either one of these. Brandon, what's the kind of like high level differences here? Obviously, right, the Bolt's a hatchback, the Model 3 is a
Mhm.
sedan. What else are we looking at in terms of like the big kind of core specs of these cars?
Yeah, so I think with the Model 3, the elephant in the room is the supercharger network and just charging speeds. Real world, the range is probably going to be pretty similar, maybe a slight edge to the Model 3, depending on the specific trim and everything that you get. If you get a long range, you're going to get a little bit more range. If you get a standard range plus Model 3, you're probably getting pretty comparable to a Bolt realistically. But the Model 3, depending on the trim, up to 250 kilowatt fast charging, or even as low as I believe it's 170 for the standard range plus, somewhere around there. Whereas the Bolt, it's a brand new vehicle. You have a full factory warranty. You have a 66 kilowatt hour battery. I believe it's rated for 250 ish miles of range. I'd plan on probably low 200s in the real world for interstate driving, but crazy efficient in the city. It's a hatchback, so it's maybe a little bit more practical depending on what you're looking to haul. Doesn't have any real driver assistance in the like lane keeping type realm. The Bolt EUV you can spec with kind of Super Cruise Light. I forgot what their technical term is, but it doesn't have all the features of Super Cruise, but does have adaptive cruise and lane keeping. Uh, I don't think you can really go wrong per se with either one, but they do each have their strong suits. And the Bolt, unfortunately, has the downside of 55 kilowatt fast charging, which means your average stop is probably going to be looking in the 45 to 60-minute range. Whereas with a Model 3, you're probably looking in the 15 to 25-minute range.
You're charging, you're getting on the road way quicker, and you have marginally more realistic real world range to begin with. So I think, yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
Model 3, if you're considering road trips at all, I know it's a few $1,000s more still used. I really think if you're considering road trips, Model 3 is kind of, I think, the obvious pick here.
Yeah, if you're planning to only drive either one under 200 miles in any given day, it's really not going to be a huge difference. You probably won't even notice any difference realistically as far as range and usability in that regard. The new Bolts are pretty comfortable. They're still, I would say, a little bit less comfortable than a Model 3. Model 3 has some really fantastic seats, and just having autopilot makes it super effortless to pile on the miles. But you are taking on some risk with buying a used car. And most likely, if you're looking in that 30-ish $1,000 range, there's a good chance that vehicle is outside of its 4-year, 50,000 mile full vehicle factory warranty. It probably still has the 8-year, 100,000 or 8-year, 120,000 mile battery and drive unit warranty. But there are still things that can fail as the mileage goes up, whether it's suspension components, the heater, just little things here and there that can break. There is that risk, and you do want to have some savings versus a brand new Bolt. It's going to be under that full factory warranty that just about everything should be covered.
Yep, it's the security of buying a new car. But like you were saying, I think that charging speed's such a big difference. And even if as being sold as a new car, I believe this is one of the slowest chargers out there, along with Nissan Leaf. But on your note of comfort, I kind of think the Bolt, yes, it's more clearly an economy car than Model 3, which has this kind of minimal aesthetic. And I agree with you, very comfortable seats. I really like that the Bolt has buttons and a driver screen, and it's like a traditional car interior. Like if I was getting out of, what I'm driving, a Mini Cooper or any kind of, traditional car, I think the Bolt would feel much more at home right away.
Yeah, I think that's just a matter of preference and what you're comfortable with. But there is something to be said for the integration that a Model 3 offers by having everything on the touchscreen, having a really fantastic mobile app that works 100% of the time. The Chevy app, I don't recall if it's still called OnStar. I think it's maybe My Chevy now. It's okay, but it's not Tesla app. Really, no one is. Even my Rivian app it's not there.
Too. You have to pay GM monthly, whereas Tesla, it's included with the car.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just, it kind of feels like nickel and diming to have to pay monthly just to have an app to control your car for some of the basic functions.
Yeah.
And the route planning in a Tesla is just amazing. Like, no one comes even close to the level of route planning sophistication that Tesla does. You can hop in any trim Model 3 from any year, and you can drive it across the country, and you won't even have to think about it. Whereas a Bolt, it will require probably a fairly significant amount of planning, and it will take you a lot longer.
Absolutely agree. Route planning is not as sophisticated. And then we talked about this earlier, but driver assistance, you have to get the Bolt EUV to even get the option to add Super Cruise. It is an extra charge. And I think Super Cruise is a pretty decent system, but it works on pre-mapped highways. So Tesla has autopilot on a lot of Model 3s, not quite every single one. Brandon and I actually did a full Model 3 deep dive video if you really are considering this choice that I recommend you check out. But some Model 3s also in the used market, actually in the affordable range, are coming equipped with FSD or full self-driving, which is a misleading name, but they have that. I think it only adds like $2,000 or $3,000 to the value of the car usually.
Yeah, somewhere in there. I'd say I typically see enhanced autopilot adding somewhere in the $1,000 to $3,000 range, and usually
on
full
the used market, I
self-driving
should specify, it's like a $12,000 feature new.
Yeah, and then I see FSD adding roughly $3,000 to $5,000 in value on the used market. But sometimes you can get lucky, and either a dealer doesn't realize what they have, or sometimes even a person doesn't realize what they have. But I think it's just quick to touch on the 4 different levels of autopilot, just for familiarity. You have autopilot safety features, which essentially is not autopilot, but has the hardware like every Model 3 does. You can enable autopilot basic, which is the next level up, for $3,000. And these are just prices accurate as of today, very much subject to change. Then you have enhanced autopilot. So that adds auto lane changes, navigate on autopilot, summon, things like that. That's an additional $6,000 on top of that. And then you have full self-driving capability, which to upgrade from basic autopilot is $12,000, or to upgrade from enhanced is $15,000 now. They raised it recently. And then to upgrade from enhanced autopilot to full self-driving is another $9,000, which these numbers are just wild when you're talking about $25,000, $30,000 cars, because it's a not insignificant portion of the vehicle's value that we're talking about.
Absolutely. And if you're one of these people who, you want your car to have as much driving smarts as possible, you're already probably super invested in this, and you really should check out the video that Brandon and I did on Model 3. But if you don't care, the autopilot safety features, I think, are pretty comparable to a lot of other manufacturers' standard
Mhm.
safety suites in terms of the very basics, like forward
But
collision avoidance, and on most SKUs of basic autopilot, some
mhm.
form of adaptive cruise control.
Yeah, but it's worth noting that autopilot safety features does not even have adaptive cruise control or any lane keeping. It is literally just the safety features like automatic emergency braking and lane departure and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So another thing I want to touch on with Model 3, if people are going that direction. So just to recap with Bolt, I think this is
Hmm.
obvious, but I want to state you got to go through a dealer, and that's either an upside or a downside for you. You have a dealer network for Chevrolet. To buy
Hmm.
a Bolt, you're getting it new, right? Through a dealer. That means you have to
Hmm.
find a dealer who has allocation, who has inventory. You might have to deal with price negotiation, all the things that go along with buying a car. That's self-explanatory. I
Yeah.
personally hate that process, which is why I think it's cool that you can buy a used car from Tesla's site,
Hmm.
but the cars on Tesla's site are kind of pricey.
Yeah, some of them are a pretty good deal here and there, but I would say overall, the used Teslas from Tesla directly are a bit more expensive than the same vehicle from a third party or a private seller. However, Tesla does add a bit of a short extended warranty on all of their vehicles. I believe it's 12-month, 12,000 miles or something very close to that. So if that helps alleviate some comfort level anxiety you may have with it, it could be worth paying very slightly more for that, just knowing that you're covered. And also not having to deal with figuring out exactly what software it has on it and potentially being duped, because at least it's straightforward buying from Tesla. You know exactly what you're getting. However, you don't know what condition you're getting because you won't actually get photos of the actual car until it shows up at the dealer's, or not dealer, but the service center or showroom when you go
Mhm.
to take delivery, which is just
Yeah.
wild to me.
Yeah, it's mostly like, a certified pre-owned model where you buy a car in a dealer lot that way and you get a
Mhm.
12-month warranty. But yeah, with that notable exception that the car gets delivered and the condition it's in is the condition it's in. So
Take it or
if you're
leave
the
it.
kind of person who cares about paint chips and things like that, a little bit of a risk there. Now you can always buy a Model 3
Hmm.
on those third-party use sites. I like to use Auto Tempest because it sorts a bunch of them like
Hmm.
Cars.com, Carvana, Craigslist. But you can look on these sites and Model 3 performance, right? Long range, these, higher end dual motor, aka all
Hmm.
wheel drive specifications of Model 3, they're also kind of affordable. Some of these ones look pricier, but they're also lower mileage.
Well, those are also newer vehicles as well. So in the 25-30 range, we're mostly talking about 2018, 2019 Model 3s for the most part. And
Mhm.
those are very easily attainable in that price range. And you can even get some Model 3 performance with higher mileage in that price range, which that is a crazy value.
Yeah, Model 3 performance is not a slow car. I mean, this standard Model 3 is going to be faster than a Bolt by a little bit, and
Yeah.
it's also a rear-wheel drive car. So if you're,
Hmm.
a car person and you like those dynamics, it's got that going for it. But Model 3 performance is up there with a lot of way more expensive sporty gas vehicles
Yeah, that's a world class performance car that's going up with the BMW M3, AMG cars, things like that, as far as performance
in
level.
acceleration. Yeah.
Yeah. And in
Yeah.
handling in some regards.
Yeah, for sure. So I think hopefully this overview video gives you an idea what to expect. The Bolt, you can't go wrong. It's a very practical option. I think it
Hmm.
can fit more. I like the hatchback style of
Hmm.
it. If your preference is also for that more traditional, let's just say technology with a screen in front of
Hmm.
you as a driver and buttons to control AC, you've got that in the Bolt.
Hmm.
If you like or don't mind the Model 3 approach with that large touchscreen, and in fact, maybe even prefer it with features like the Tesla app, and you want, to look into those more advanced options like enhanced autopilot and full self-driving, then that leads you towards Model 3. But I think the biggest thing is what we mentioned at the beginning. It's just charging. If you're willing to, if you're eligible for the tax credit, no doubt about it, the Bolt, I think, is still a cheaper car that gets enough range. But man, that charging just makes it so tough on road trips. Also, Kyle and I have an episode on this coming out, but no battery conditioning on the Bolt. So If you
Hmm.
want to know what that is, watch that video. We'll explain it. But basically, the Bolt will lose a lot more range, or lose a lot of charging speed in winter because it has no way of conditioning the battery. Whereas the Model 3, that's built into Tesla's route planning.
Yeah, and the Bolt charging is already painful, so to make it
Mhm.
even more painful is just I my personal recommendation and what I would personally buy is a Model 3, but that may not be the choice for everyone and depending on their risk for appetite or appetite for risk.
Yeah. I would say Tesla inventory is very volatile and the best of times, even like now.
Yeah.
And Bolt inventory has also been weird regionally, but generally there are a lot of Bolts out there. We haven't even
Hmm.
talked about getting a used Bolt, but you still can do that as well. So yeah, I have a quick start guide on the Bolt, by the way, if you want to know how to get going with that. I think a lot of
Hmm.
it's actually pretty normal for cars, but
Hmm.
there'll be an upcoming one in Model 3 as well, because Model 3, in my opinion, is way weirder to figure out. I like it. It's cool. It's high tech, but there's a lot going on in that car for someone who isn't used to that.
Yeah, it's a very different way of approaching a vehicle. It's more like figuring out Android if you're coming from an iPad than it is like switching between vehicles.
Yeah, everything from the door handles to the screen to the way you interact with it, everything is just
Hmm.
different. So
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, that's a high level overview of both cars, both great options. I think it's wonderful that we're finally seeing like I think viable daily long range EVs at this price.
Hmm.
It's a shame it took this long to get here, but I'm so glad we're here.
Absolutely. And if you haven't already, hit the like button, comment down below what you would buy, and also shout out to Dominic Yoni because this is essentially his purchase decision that he needs to make. And if you made it this long, go tell him what you think he should buy.
Yeah, if you know Dominic from Inside EVs, the man has been perusing a Bolt for a while, but now also might be looking at Model 3s. Did he even say Polestar 2? I don't know. He's
Oh
looking at a
God.
lot of cars. But anyhow, this has been Out of Spec Guide. Thank you so much for joining me, Brandon. If you want to get
Absolutely.
the nerdier side of EVs, there's Out of Spec reviews, but Brandon also has a great channel where you cover your ownership experience with your cars, like your Rivian, as
Hmm.
well as charging and a bunch of other really cool things.
Yeah, I go way nerdy on the charging stuff.
Yeah, so go subscribe to Brandon if you want to go in depth on that. His videos are really great. And thanks for joining me, Brandon.
Thank you for having me. See you on the next one.